Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and today my guest is David Collier, who recently returned from a 3-week trip to Afghanistan. David Collier works in the agricultural manufacturing industry and lives in Shepparton, Victoria, about 2 hours north of Melbourne. He is currently the operations and sales manager at FeedTech Feeding Systems, which builds livestock feeding equipment in Australia. And David, it's really good to have you here, and I was glad that you reached out after your trip.
Yes, look, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's feel a bit privileged actually, but yeah, since I come back from the trip, I've just been trying to seek more information and read more info about Afghanistan. And one of the things was listen to podcasts, and I come across your podcast, and it's probably no different to here. I've done a couple back here in Australia as well, where people want to know what my trip was like. They want to know certain parts of the trip, all the fluffy stuff, and there was some good bits, but they also want to know what was the Taliban like, what was it really like in Afghanistan. So I've actually enjoyed sort of telling the story of my trip. It's been good.
Yeah, and I was going to tell my audience, if you want to hear about that trip in depth, you've talked about it on the Digging Deeper podcast. You've kind of gone through the steps you took, why you had to do some things and not other things. And then you have a Facebook page where you've posted about it and posted lots and lots of pictures. The Afghanistan Journal's David Collier. So I'm going to link to both of those in the show notes, because here I want to talk about something different. And I told you when I said I'll have you on, I said I'm not going to make it easy for you in the beginning.
You did pre-warn me, yes.
Yeah, I want everyone to understand, it's so hard for me. I had Mike No Go Zones on here a while back. He had gone to Kabul right before it fell, and we were talking about people who are going now and now it has, tourism has increased a lot in Afghanistan. In the early days, the people who were going were doing it to, be to raise a ruckus, to make a scene, to, make a statement. And, Afghanistan is a beautiful place. I have never been, and I want to go one day. Not now, though, because I think what Mike had made the point of is when you go, you legitimize this regime that, 2 days ago, by the time people see this, it will have been almost a week ago, that the International Criminal Court filed arrest warrants against Hibatullah Akhundzada, the supreme leader of the Taliban, and against the Chief Justice, Abdul Hakim Haqqani. And it's because of what they're doing to women in that country, and what they're doing with reprisals, stonings, rapes in prisons, things that you said on the Digging Deeper podcast. I didn't see those things. And just because you didn't see them does not mean, obviously, that they're not taking place. But the Taliban would never show you that part of their country.
Yeah,
so and I know too, so I want to say this up front, that you do want to go back, and I know that that could be problematic for you if you're out there talking about the Taliban. And I guess my first question for you would be, did you do any reading about Lynn O'Donnell and what happened to her when she went?
No.
Okay. I've had her on the podcast. Do you know now? Have you looked into her at all since?
No, I'll take note of it.
Oh, you definitely ought to. She's actually come on the podcast before. She was a journalist who's covered Afghanistan from basically the 2001, right after September 11th. But she went back about a year after the Taliban took control, and she had been there at the fall too, and she had written stories about how they were going around trying to just take women. They would go into a town, conquer it, and say, "Give us your women. Anybody who's unmarried, we're going to marry them to our soldiers." And when she came back a year later, they made her retract her journalism through this very clunky Twitter tweet and held her until she did, and wouldn't release her. And luckily they did release her. She was one of the lucky people, but she said it was a very frightening, and
you just feel when you first arrive into the country. And I went through Pakistan, and I did actually, right? Yes, and I did join up with 2 Australian travellers as well, who I met on a travel blog prior to going, and they were actually 2 Australian women. and they wanted to go, and sort of that's why we went via Pakistan and Torkham border, which is sort of where the experience sort of really started at that border, because that was the time when Pakistan were removing all the Afghanistan refugees. So it was a very, very busy border. Luckily, we got there about half an hour before it opened, and being foreigners, we got led around and we were actually put in front, so we could go through before they all went through, but they ended up catching up with us anyway. But yeah, right through the whole journey from then to when I left, you felt a sense of control. You always felt that someone was looking over your shoulder, and I think that's just because everywhere that you went in, especially Kabul, a lot of checkpoints, a lot of soldiers, a lot of utility vehicles with Taliban on the back, and then when you're going from city to city, and we did the whole loop of Afghanistan, there was just checkpoints as well. So you really felt there was a sense of control. And I do remember in Ghazni when we went to go to the Ministry of Information and Culture, which we had to go to in each province. The government worker there, he was very, very forward and said, "Look, I will show you around Ghazni tomorrow. I will be there at 8:30 in the morning." And then he walked me and one of the travellers back to the hotel. And he didn't show up the next day. He didn't show. I gave him half an hour, and I went, "No, I'm going." So I left, and then he turned up at the end of the day. He was all right, but yeah, where were you this morning? But yeah, you just felt there was that sense of control, and obviously going into Kandahar itself as well, which is a very conservative province, very conservative city. That's where the Taliban were formed in Afghanistan. As soon as you got into that city, it just felt different. It just didn't feel like the other cities, and that's where one of my travellers, she had an experience there. She was walking around the city by herself. A Taliban soldier came up to her, took a passport off her, took her phone off her. No reason at all. She was she decided to cause a bit of a ruckus, started yelling and screaming, and then a senior Taliban man came up and got that back to her and apologised. But, normally as a foreigner, they say that, we sort of get a bit of an easy way through. We don't get hassled too much. But, and that Taliban soldier would have got a bit of trouble for that. But yeah, you just felt there was a control all the way around.
Sure. I wondered too, so, you talk on the Digging Deeper podcast about how, there were WhatsApp groups talking about how to do this safely.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
anybody talk, because I'm trying to do the math in my head. The last 6 months have been such a whirlwind that it's hard for me to pinpoint when you would have left. When did you leave?
I left from there to come back home.
No, left to go there.
To go there would have been the 23rd of April.
So that was almost exactly a month after they released George Glassman from Taliban detention. He was an American tourist who was held in Taliban prison for 2 years in a basement, fed gristly bits of meat with Ryan Corbett, subjected to extremely bad treatment. And does anybody talk about him, or like Faye Hall? No one even knew about Faye Hall, who was
really,
released on the 29th. Yeah, no, nobody's talking about.
On a lot of the travel blogs, and they were all through Facebook originally, and there is an agency. There's a few travel agencies now in Afghanistan, and one of them was Afghanistan Travel Experience. So they've probably got the best Facebook page, and then they have WhatsApp groups, and you'd go there and ask questions, but there was never any negativity like to that extent. There's prisoners being held. There's this happening. It was all our bit was the Torkham border, because when we were going to cross it, it kept closing. So the Taliban and the Pakistanis they were having some argy-bargy at that time. So they closed the border for 2 days, 3 days. So we're trying to work out a plan B if that happened. What would we do and where would we go? But yeah, you never heard any of the gruesome stuff of the hostages. And I did my research, but my bit was more about how can I do it? Is it safe for me? And I can be continually asking people through these groups, you know, is it going to be safe? Are we, you know, and our DFAT, our government department here, if I go onto their website, it's don't go. You know, you can get held hostages. It's still a terrorist organisation, blah, blah, blah. But we still went. Because a lot of the travel blogs, and even on YouTube, there's a lot of travellers who go there and they're doing a lot of vlogging. And but they never talk about the dark side. It's always probably put a little bit of a positive spin on there, but there's always Taliban in there as well. And there is a travel vlog, I forget who he is, and it's, you know, he travelled with the Taliban for 7 days. And he did a vlog for 7 days, and it was all fluffy material. When, you know, there's two sides. There's what people want to show you, and there's what really is happening.
Right. And I think that's the part that's really hard to stomach, because, you know, I've got one good friend who runs an NGO that specifically helps rape victims who've been raped by the Taliban, because they will take, in the beginning it was a lot of Tajiks. They would pull Tajiks off the street and put them in houses, and their soldiers would just go in and rape them every day. And it's happening in their prisons. You know, there's been video evidence, and I've asked Suhail Shaheen for Fox News, and I think for the Washington Examiner, both of them, about these allegations that women are being raped in prisons. And not just that they're being raped, but that they're then forced to have abortions, or if they become so ill from the treatment that they're getting, they just get killed. And Suhail said, no, that's not happening. And then this probably happened about a year ago. And Suhail, for anybody who's not aware, is the head of the political office in Qatar. He's the spokesperson there. And so then The Guardian got video of a woman being gang raped in a prison, because they sent it to her to coerce her into, not talking to, they thought that it would keep her from talking, because culturally in Afghanistan, if you're raped as a woman, that's bad for you. It's not bad for the person who did it. It is bad for you. If you're married, that's adultery. Even if it's rape, it doesn't matter. Anyway, she showed it to The Guardian. She didn't care. She's like, here, this is what happened to me. And they sent it to me to try to keep me silent, and I'm not going to be silent. And Suhail didn't have anything to say about that, from my recollection. But they don't tell the truth about all of these things that are going on. And so it's so hard when people come in and then go travel with the Taliban for 7 days, because that's not the truth of what's happening to Afghans inside that country.
Yeah. Look, I didn't go there to legitimize Afghanistan by any means. I went there to experience what Afghanistan is like myself. The region that I'm from in Australia here is the town from Shepparton, and we've got a big Afghan community here. There's about roughly 2,500 Afghans, and they're all refugees, and they've all got stories. So I sort of wanted to go over there and visit their country, because they've said that their country is beautiful. And so that was sort of one of the reasons why I wanted to go over there. And to actually meet the people on the street. Bamiyan was a big eye opener for myself. We're up at the village. We stayed near the village, and you're just the kids, when you start talking to the younger girls there, who are 13, 14, and they say that they've got to stop school. They're not allowed to school anymore, and so you ask what they do, and we go and work out in the fields. That was the side that I wanted to sort of learn more about. Is the poverty is just, it's very disheartening. But the fact that a young girl, and we as we travelled around, we met up with other girls as well who are younger, and all they want to do is learn. They want to learn more, and they want to become doctors or lawyers, and they really want to forward their life, but they just don't have that opportunity. And if that ever changed, Afghanistan as a whole would change, because then people would look at Afghanistan in a different way if they could get the human rights and women's rights. But will that ever change? Probably not.
Yeah, and I think, and here's what I thought about, because I really struggled over, what does it mean to travel to Afghanistan and what you did. And as I was thinking about it, I thought too, if nobody goes, then there's nobody to document that that's really happening, right? And I looked at your
Yep.
pictures on your Facebook, and it is primarily men. There are women. In one of the bizarre scenes, there are some women all in these beautiful flowered
Yep.
burqas. You know, they're covered. They don't have their faces fully covered, but you know, that is, you see some of the way it is, and you know, you get to hear from those girls, and at least what you do see, somebody is seeing that. But I just think it's so important to tell the truth about it. But then, like I said earlier, I worry if you want to go back and you've ever said anything. I know we were talking about this before you started recording, that they take your picture everywhere they go,
Yep.
and you didn't think there was a big central repository, and there might not be yet, but I know because they're working with China, they're trying to get the Huawei facial recognition technology over there, and they've already, I don't know how much of our hide software they can access, or if they have any of the hide facial recognition equipment. I know that people I've talked to have told me that they are using facial recognition equipment at some checkpoints, but yeah, you would probably have
Yeah.
seen.
We didn't have any of that. No,
Yeah.
there were no checkpoints we went to where you would stand in front of a camera and they'd take your picture. It was always they take a picture of your visa, passport, visa, and then probably your travel permit was probably the other big one. Yeah, and all the provinces were all a little bit different. Like
Sure.
around Canada, you hardly saw a woman. And if you did, yep, they were fully covered. Probably Mazar-e Sharif was probably the same as well, and you just felt sorry because it was over 40 degrees. Um, but then you go to Kabul was a little bit more open. You saw a lot more ladies, females walking around, and probably Herat as well. Herat was probably the biggest thing. We just didn't see any Taliban around there at all. There was no checkpoints, no nothing. So it was very, very different from province to province. But it was just a big thing to go into a shop or to go into an eating place, or even to jump on a plane, internal plane. It's all male workers. There's no female workers except for some of the airports or some of the government places. And that was just a big shock to the system as well, not to see that.
You mentioned in the podcast something about women check at checkpoints too, that you would get checked by a female at some of the, was it checkpoints, or was it when you
No,
first
no,
came
not the
in?
checkpoint. No, it was more. No, I think that was more. No, I never got checked by women.
I
I
meant the
know.
women did. The women that
So yeah,
you
yeah,
came
yeah.
in
No,
with.
no,
Yeah,
Vicky. Yeah,
they.
no, yeah, no. The two ladies that I went with when they, not all checkpoints, just some of the places we went to. It was more to do with searches. You know, I'd jump in, you put your bag on a scanner. The ladies would have to go through another section to where and get checked by a lady. But no, not myself. But they were very, yeah, every checkpoint it was always me. I was the one who would have to fill out the paperwork if paperwork filled out. Um, yeah, get the passports, fill out all the information. The two ladies were basically ghosts, except at one stage, I think, yeah, one of the ones we went to, the Taliban bloke told me to fill out the paperwork, and one of the ladies I was with, the travellers, and she's been to 140 odd countries, so she's seen a fair bit. She was quite, no, I'm filling this out, and she stepped forward to fill it out, and they just let her do it. I think that's because we're foreigners. As a Western lady, they probably let it happen. But if that was an Afghani who did that, I'd hate to think what would happen.
Did you see any, you know, any interactions between the Taliban and women of the country, like Afghan women, or not so much?
No, not really. Not really. Not through any of the checkpoints. Even just around Kabul was probably where you saw a majority of them. But no, not you wouldn't really see any interaction at all. You know, we just saw a lot of the times where you would have more than likely that the husband be driving the vehicle in the front, there'd be no one in the passenger seat, and the wife would be in the back. And if it's a truck, she's in the back of the truck. Um, And but no, I never saw. No, there wasn't really much interaction. No, I never saw any at all.
Yeah, I'd heard that. I'd heard that with cabs. I hadn't heard that with a vehicle that your husband is driving that you would be in the very back, and that's just
Yeah, no,
so.
and that was
You're a
when we
second
first.
class citizen. I mean, you're
Yeah, and
not.
that's when we and look, it was even the same with the station wagon. They'd have the station wagon, so obviously you got the front seats and you got the back seats, and then you got the back section of the station wagon. The station wagon door would be up at the back, and the women would be sitting in the back of there, while there'd be no one in the front except for the driver. They were definitely, yeah, at the very back.
It's just wild. And I always wonder because I can't take like your photos and go around and try to see the full panorama of these things, and people will try to tell you that, oh no, that's a lie. That's not really happening. And it is really important then for somebody like you to be able to say, no, I saw this and that is in fact real, because otherwise it's very hard to fact check a lot of
It
things
is. It
that.
is hard. And I was looking at a YouTube clip there on the weekend, and it was I think they were English people going around Afghanistan. They were saying, we don't see any women in the streets at all, in a part of their video. And I say, well, I didn't see that. I did often see women, except some of the provinces were a little bit different. So you did see women. And the bazaar where we saw that was in Herat. I went to next to the mosque there, and there's bazaar there, and it was just full of women shopping for silks and etc. Or cotton clothing. Um, but then, yeah, so you did see them. It was just all, yeah, it's just depending on what province you're in, and but they were definitely always second class citizens, and which was very hard to take at times, considering where we come from in the Western world. That was probably one of the hardest things to take, and the fact that I touched on before about the schooling and that yeah, the ladies aren't allowed to go to schooling.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Bamiyan because Bamiyan is a place where the women can't go to the beautiful like sea part. I'm sure you know what I'm
To,
talking about.
to the Bandimere, to the national park
Yeah,
there, yeah.
Bandimere. Yes, that's
Yeah.
it. So, is that? Did you see any women there? Or is that very
Um,
much?
I think that from what I gather, we went there, and the two travellers I were with, we went there. We didn't actually go right around to the shore where the boats are. There was on one of the travel blogs, there was a couple from France, I think, was staying there, and she would say that yeah, she had to basically she was there, but she couldn't go swimming. She wasn't allowed to go in the water. She had to hide. And then I got told about 2 weeks later that they stopped women from going there altogether. So I think they just it's probably like the Torquay border. I think just sometimes it's open, sometimes it's shut. It depends on who's running it today, if they're going to let women in there or not. So I just think sometimes with the Taliban, the right hand isn't talking to the left hand, and sometimes they'll make decisions. We definitely saw some areas of a bit of corruption there as well, where we did give gratitude to a soldier. We had to take a soldier with us to go to the ancient city at Mazar-e Sharif out to Balkh. We had to take a soldier there. That was part of the what we have to do, and then we went and shouted him lunch. We all went to a lunch spot, and he was with us, so he went in. He went and sat with all his Taliban guys. The lunch was probably a little bit more expensive than it would normally be. The guide that we had for that day, and we only had guides 3 times for the whole trip for 3 weeks. Other than that, it was just us. And he said, "Oh, gee, our meal's very expensive." And he said, "Well, more than likely the Taliban has told the restaurant, add 300 Afghani onto the bill, and then we would pay it." And we gave him gratitude, but he told his senior officer that he didn't get gratitude, that we supplied him lunch instead. And then there'd be way more corruption than that little bit, but there's definitely there.
I'd love to go back to Torkham. I can't even imagine what it was like to watch all of those Afghans going across. And that was early days for the deportations. I mean, now we're seeing that it's even more. What was that like? How did people look?
It's one of those. Yeah, that was our first real. There was some poverty in Pakistan, leaving Peshawar, where I had to catch the bus. It was just a disgusting area. When we got to the border, yeah, like I said, we sort of got put into a little cage at the front, and we're sitting there. And we weren't allowed to take photos, but your camera might take up the odd photo, and there was just kids there trying to sell eggs. They were very scrappy looking. They're just trying to make a dollar basically. And then as everywhere you'll go, there was always kids begging, just wanted money because they've just got nothing. But so the kids, so even the adults, or the refugees, they look dirty. They're from that minority, I suppose. But then when we got to the Pakistan side, that was probably the more eye-opening side, because when you had some of the Afghans coming back the other way, and I don't know what their story was or why they were going back the other way, the Pakistan soldiers would be whipping them. I'm reading a book at the moment, Afghanistan, where God only goes to weep, and it's a really good story, and it actually talks about the border way back then as well, and that would have been probably after the Russians got outed, so that's many years ago, and there was a lot of civil fighting. So the Afghans were getting out of Afghanistan, so they were crossing that border. And they didn't call it the Torkham border then, they were just saying they were heading to the Khyber Pass. But yeah, back then they were saying how they were whipping the Afghans to get across, and that was exactly the same thing as well. So it was very hard, and even then we got through that border. We went to the Afghan side. We eventually got our passports or visas stamped to go through. We found our shared taxi, and then we were exchanging a little bit of money, and then we got tapped on the shoulder by the Taliban to go back. So we had to get put into a room, and look, it wasn't nothing bad happened at all. It was a bit scary. They had the Taliban banner on the wall. We were just sitting on the ground. We did have to get our photo taken in front of the banner, which it was a bit scary. Didn't know what was going to happen after that, but with what we've seen in the past. But he just went through our phones, went WhatsApp, who do we know Afghanistan, what's our itinerary. Yeah, he just asked a lot of questions, and look, sometimes you could sort of be a little bit argy-bargy, and we got let through there anyway. But that was probably our first real experience with the Taliban. So it didn't end up being bad, but it was, I'd hate to think. And, you're looking around that border, you're looking at the walls, and you're looking at the windows, and you can see bullet holes through there as well. So you sort of start thinking about when the NATO and the Americans were there as well.
Sure, or just border skirmishes between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm amazed that the Pakistani border guards did not stop beating Afghans because you were there. Like, I'm surprised that I've heard about it. I think I've seen video of it even, but it's just it's astonishing that they don't even, that's not even a concern that somebody might see it. It's like these Afghans are so below them that they can just do.
And there was, once again, I was looking at a vlog on the weekend of some travellers, and that was 2 men and 2 women, and the women got very distraught by seeing that, and it's not something we see over here. So when you actually do see it, and especially when you're seeing it being done to kids, it's even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it with the Taliban. I can't tell you how many videos I've seen of the Taliban beating people senseless since the fall, and it's horrifying. We don't do that. So it's very off-putting, and it just gives you a pit in your stomach that this is a normal thing. I want to ask you, you mentioned something before we started recording that some of the travelers that you'd met up with from New Zealand, you saw them again in Mazar-e Sharif and they had been locked
Yeah.
up by the Taliban. Can you tell everybody about
Yeah,
what
look,
that was about?
we originally saw them at the guest house in Kabul. It was a husband and wife from New Zealand. They were traveling through Afghanistan on a motorbike, and we got talking to them there. And then when we left to go to Ghazni, we took a shared taxi to Ghazni. We got to one of the checkpoints, and as we were at the checkpoint, they rode up, so we we're talking to them again. And then, funny enough, about 2.5 weeks later, when we were at Mazar-e Sharif at the guest house there, they were there. And so I started talking to them, and yeah, they had a bad experience in Ghazni where they basically got locked into a room and they weren't allowed to go. They were locked in there. Everything was taken from them. No reason at all. And they just, yeah, they caused a bit of a ruckus, threatened to break windows, whatever, and then they actually got let out then. And I've heard of other stories since then as well on different WhatsApp groups and blogs where that's sort of can be a bit of a common thing. But like I said, we didn't get that. I've always said to people, prior to that, probably, as long as you got your correct paperwork, you got your passport, you got your visa, you're doing the right thing by their culture. We'd be pretty right. But there's definitely times where people have been, locked up when they didn't have to be.
Well, and I will preface my next question with anyone I know who has lots of Afghans in their contact lists in WhatsApp and Signal or anything should probably not go ever. And I still firmly believe that this is not the time to travel to Afghanistan, even though it helped, there are arguments to be made, right? People need money in Afghanistan. People need jobs, and tourism brings jobs, brings money, all of that. Totally valid. But the Taliban, I still believe it provides legitimacy to the Taliban and whitewashes so much of the bad that they're doing, because you can't, if they think you are saying bad things about them, you are then on the imprisoned list. But let's pretend that it's 5 years from now and the Taliban are gone and, it's the time to be traveling. Tell me what were the most amazing things in each of the provinces that you did get to see.
Look, every day, I tell people, I say, look, every day was a challenge, but it wasn't a bad challenge. It was a good challenge. It could be just a language thing. It could be trying to find shared taxis, buses, etc. I think every province we went to, it was just the people. They've gone through a lot, and the kids go through a lot, but they all say hello. They all want to come over and ask where we're from. We'd always get invited back to their houses for tea. They were just so opening and so friendly. The countryside's to die for. Just to go from Kabul to Bamiyan, the mountain tops, the snow. Bamiyan was probably one of the biggest experiences I had, and I'd nearly say life changing, because that's where I've met an Afghani man who's actually a government school teacher, and we were just walking through the village and saying hello to the kids. And one of the travellers I went with, she took tennis balls and blow up balloons and that with her on the trip. And she'll give a balloon to a kid, and they think it's Christmas, and it's just a simple little balloon. Anyway, we met this English teacher, and he invited us in for tea, and it was just good there to sit there, and he was pretty open with things. He's a Hussar, so he's a minority in the country. He hadn't been paid for 2 months. He's got 5 daughters, 7 kids in total, 5 daughters. So then you start to think, well, 5 daughters, what happens if he can't feed them? And I don't want to go into details, but it wouldn't be a pretty picture. And so when I got back to Kabul, I was just started thinking, and I was talking to him on WhatsApp, and I ended up transferring him 20,000 Afghani. That's equivalent to 3 months' wage, because he had no food. and he had to feed his kids. So to me, that's a pretty life experience, and I'm still talking to him as well. And he's had a couple of other experiences. His cousin got murdered about 2 weeks ago. They did find the murderer. It wasn't a Taliban by any means, but they did find the murderer. But he's saying now how the Taliban want to take his meters off the house, his electricity meters, and send them to Kandahar, and they will have to buy new meters, and a new meter is about 6,000 Afghani, so it's not a lot. I think it's probably just over 200 Aussie dollars. So I've said I'd pay for that so he can get a meter so he can have electricity. But it was just a kind soul. I had a video call from him the other night, and I took it, and he's actually in a guest house, and he's got an Australian fella there who are riding from Australia to London on motorbikes going through Afghanistan, and one of the motorbikes got cameras and some money stolen from it. So he was helping them with the Taliban to as the interpreter to try and get and they did actually get their stuff back, so which was good. I don't know what happened with the thieves. I think they were getting roughed up a fair bit, and they were saying, just let them go, because obviously there's no money there. So it was more the countryside and the people. I love Kabul. There is a lot of poverty there, down where the markets are, where the river's there. The river's absolutely disgusting. It's got that much general waste in there, but they'll still be washing their clothes in it. So you did see the lot of poverty. So every day there was ups and downs. But to me, I walk away with a positive experience and still wanting to do more. So I'm in communication with different groups. How can I, it's not about sending money, because I'm not a rich man, so I just can't keep pumping money into. How else can I help? I want to get involved with the local Afghan community here. They built a new mosque here in the region, and it was all by their own money. There was no government grant, so I want to get involved with the community here to see what else I can try and do back there. It's just a beautiful country, and it's just what it's been through and what the people have been through, but the way how they're so resilient and they still smile, it's just amazing.
Yeah, and if anybody isn't aware of what happens if you don't have money and you have many girls, this has been a huge problem. It's not a new problem, but since the fall, it's been a big increase because of the amount of poverty in the country, that girls will be sold into marriage as children. Dowries will be sold for little, like, baby girls, because you have to feed the rest of your kids.
Yeah.
And it's been a tragedy to see that. I mean, even I think I saw a story just last week about an 8-year-old girl sold to a 67-year-old man, and just, it's heinous. One of the women I'm still trying to help, she, I can't help her, and I've never actually been able to help her other than telling her story, but she was forced into marriage at the age of 12. And I mean, she's got grown kids now, so this was a long time ago. Yeah. It's not new. Anyway, it's been hell for her, and I worry that the return of the Taliban has taken women back another 20 years because of how long it's going to take just to rise out of what's happening, and the poverty that's then hurt women even more, and the fact that the Taliban, because here's the argument, yes, the Taliban make the rules, right? And then sometimes people will fight them. There were women who were really brave who were out there protesting for a while. You don't hear that anymore happening, but the Taliban started saying, well, we're going to have, if you do something wrong, we're going to punish the men in your family, which meant that not only is the Taliban making these rules against women, they're being enforced by their own brothers and dads. And it's become this just everyone dogpiling on Afghan women, and how do you get out from that? Especially if people believe that that's the way that, women need to be treated, and it's for their their improvement. Anyway, I could go on. I'm not going to pontificate on that. I think helping Afghans is so vital, and I think it's great that you want to give more and see how this amazing group of people can be helped. And I agree. Every time an Afghan reaches out to me, I've said this on the podcast probably close to 20 times by now, it doesn't matter if the Taliban is at their door. It's, how are you? And I need your help. But the first question is always, how are you? How is your family? How is, it's just such...
Oh, they're amazing. When I helped that family in Bamiyan, he made an 8-hour return trip and come to Kabul and gave myself and one of the travellers gave us some gifts, and then his daughter wrote myself a letter to say thank you, and she also wrote my son a letter to say how brave I was, and so their pride and joy at home. So it's and my mother was recently in hospital, and I was getting messages saying it's not your mother, it's our mother as well, and always asking how she is. So even though they're going through a lot, they still ask. But, definitely one of the questions, how can we get to Australia? How can we leave Afghanistan? And I don't know how many times that was asked to me through the trip. And that wasn't just from older families in that situation. It was also younger guys who were 22, 23 who were working in some of the guest houses. How can we get to your country? We want to get to your country. And there was an absolute fantastic story from one of the chaps who worked at the guest house where we were, where he was telling me he would walk 2 hours to work 12 hours, walk 2 hours home, and since then I've chipped in and we've bought him a motorbike so he can now ride to work and back. But he told me the story when he was in love with a girl and he was engaged and he wanted to marry her, but her family said no, you've got to become worldly. So he travelled to Germany by foot, by hitchhiking, by boat, went to Germany, spent 2 years there and taught English, and then made the trip back thinking, yep, he's going to marry her, and she went and married somebody else. And so that was just a very heartwarming trip, and I've spoken to him since, and we're friends now, and now he's really desperate to get out. He wanted me to check a visa while I was over there on my laptop to try and get to the States. Obviously, no, I think it was a diversity visa, and there was no way. He wants to marry this girl, but for him to marry the girl, he's got to come up with dollars, and it could be anywhere from 3,000 US up to 20,000 US to marry this girl. And so, but we don't, as normal Westerners, we don't get that. If we see a girl, like a girl, love a girl, you propose and hopefully she says yes and you marry them. And it's easy. But for them, for us to travel, it's easy for us to travel. Yep, I want to go to America, buy a ticket. Hopefully immigration will let me in because I've been to Afghanistan. But yep, you'd normally, we can travel wherever we want, where they can't. They just can't even leave their country, and they want to better themselves, and they just don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, it feels like the whole country is just being kept hostage by a group they did not vote for, that they did not want. There are people who support the Taliban, for sure. But it's interesting to me that everyone you talked to felt free enough to say that to you, that they would...
Oh, look, and that was probably the thing when we would talk to someone, how open they were with us. And I know when we had the Taliban soldier in our shared taxi, and we're all pretty quiet. And then we were at lunch, he went and sat somewhere else, and the guide said, "Oh, now I can open up, and now I can talk." And he would say how people would be quiet if they were very vocal, they would just go missing. And there is a movie I saw on the weekend called Bread and Roses, I think it's called. It was, it gives you a bit of an input there. I think it was produced, or executive producer was Jennifer Lawrence. So that was good to see as well. But yeah, we've got it very easy on our side.
Yeah, that one's a great documentary. I would urge everyone to watch it because it really shows just the how bad things got for women and how quickly, and how any woman who had a profession suddenly is like, I can't do this, I can't protest, I can't. They show a lot of those early protests, like the one where the women got drenched with fire hoses. They turned the fire hoses on the women protesters. Yeah, that's an excellent documentary.
And we did speak to he's actually lives in Holland now, and he was born in Afghanistan but lives there now, and he was talking about us one day, and he's sort of a little bit really likes the politics side of things, and he's saying there are factions in the Taliban who want change, that they want women's rights, they want that, but will they ever get up? Have they got the voice? No, they won't.
That's the thing. This has been, ever since I worked in intelligence on Taliban senior leadership, there have always been, oh, well, it's these people, and they might, and and you know who always runs the Taliban? The Supreme Leader. And you know how the Supreme Leader changes in his viewpoints? Never, never. And could there be one day? I hope. I really hope. But I have yet to see any group within the Taliban stand up enough to make that change, especially, to put it all on the line for women. Now, what they will do is they'll send their daughters to go get educated in, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. But so they know, and there are the people who believe in education for girls, but they won't change it for everyone. And that, it's so galling. I don't have enough. I'm going to zip it for right now. I guess, if somebody were talking to you and saying that, what you did was tacit approval of the Taliban, and that it, helps them get recognized, what would be your response to that?
And I've sort of read that a little bit as well, where people have wanted to travel over there, but they think that it's an advertisement for the Taliban, and look, my response would be, for me, I didn't do it for the Taliban. I didn't do it to promote Afghanistan as a travel destination, like going to Florida or to the Gold Coast here in Australia. The more that I went over there and I spent, I don't know how many thousand Afghani, probably 30,000 Afghani. And that's all gone back to the shopkeepers, back to the restaurant people. It was gratitude to different people. So I don't think I've because I've gone and I've actually promoted or talked good about the Taliban. It was just, I've gone for the people. Their tax system over there, or lack of tax system, it's all cash. So, and that's part of the problem with the country, is they've got no money. But they wouldn't have a clue how much shops turn over, because they don't know what income they have. So I don't know how the tax system works over there, but it's a cash society.
That's interesting. And I think that, I can see where you see that. And then I still see where other people say that
absolutely.
Is,
Look,
that
everyone's got their right to an opinion, and if you had 5 people standing in a row and you asked that question to 5 people have different answers. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wasn't over there to support the Taliban, or would I recommend for someone to go over there? That was probably a question that I think came up on the podcast, and I put, if someone wanted to go there, but don't think that it's a holiday like going to the Gold Coast here. There is challenges. There is hazards by going over there, but if it means that you can go over there and spend some money over there to help some of those people, or do what I did, come back and start supporting a family and someone else as well, well, if it's going to help them, we'll do it. So I would tell people, if they wanted to go there. Now that might be against what some people think or what you maybe think as well, but and that's one of the reasons why I want to go back. But maybe after this podcast, I better wait a couple of years.
That might be wise.
But no, look, I would, I'm trying not to support them, but I would definitely, tell people to go.
So for me, I am in the middle of, so I can tell you right now, so many people in my direct contacts list would immediately point to this. So Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security here, when she explained why we're not giving temporary protected status to Afghans who came during the fall anymore, she cited improved economic conditions in Afghanistan, which from everything you said sounds like the economic conditions, and I know this too. I mean, I'm very well aware that there is no. Also, at the same time that she said this, Iran was sending hundreds of thousands of Afghans back, and Pakistan was sending hundreds of thousands of Afghans back. So you had, even if you had a burgeoning economy, you had now hundreds, almost 1 million people added to this economy that can't sustain itself.
Yeah.
But the other thing she said was that she cited tourism, an increase in tourism, as a reason that Afghanistan is fine. And here's the difference, okay? You can go, right? You went and you were fine. You never got locked up. The Western women you went with were fine. They're discernibly Western women. I am talking to people every day who are deathly afraid of going back because they worked for the former government. And in many cases, they are recognizable. Some of them are renowned political leaders. They can't go back. They will be murdered. They will be put in a Taliban prison, and they might never see the light of day again. In my estimation, you were lucky. And I think that the more that time goes on, the more luck travelers are having. That they're not, it's not George Glesman who was doing exactly what you did when he got arrested for 2 years, and just treated like trash. Or like Lord somebody, the British gentleman. Do you remember him? Lord Miles, I think. He did some of the early traveling through Afghanistan, and then he came back, and the Taliban were going to do a shoe brand or something with him, but then they locked him up, and it was not good. And I just want for all those people, it's not safe for them to go. And that's the sad thing, that it's safer for someone like you who is not Afghan to go to Afghanistan than it is for somebody who was born there, who has their whole life worth of ties there, and they can't go back, and we aren't protecting them anymore. And that's not your fault. That's not, you didn't do that. I think it's this air that the Taliban have tried to cultivate, that they're fine. They're only treating women the way that Islam says. Well, if you look at any other Islamic country, they don't treat their women like that. They don't deprive their girls of an education.
That's what I came back and I was talking to a journalist the other week, and he when I was talking to him, he actually knew a bit, I'd say, about this and that. And he'd go, well, no, in the Quran you can't do that. And he's actually he was a Christian. He converted to Muslim, and he was pretty au fait with the Quran. So I've actually I bought a copy of the Quran, an English version, and I will read it at some point, or attempt to read it at some point. But I'm also listening to a version of it in English as well, and via audio. And some of the stuff that comes up on it, you think, well, that's opposite to what should be happening. So all the Muslim countries have all got their individual cultures as well, and Afghanistan, the Taliban, is to the extreme of what a Muslim should be.
I would love, I don't know if you've come across this book, but this is my hero of one of my many heroes, but her name is Pashtana Durrani, and she wrote Last to Eat, Last to Learn. She is the only woman to be voted a Khan in a Pashtun tribe. Her father was the Khan of the Baraksai tribe, the Durrani Baraksai tribe. Anyway, she wrote this book. She started a group called Learn Afghanistan, and she is now persona non grata within her country because of that. But the way that she got buy-in at first, because she started this under the former Afghan government, and she had to convince these local Pashtun leaders in Kandahar that their daughters should be going to school. And at first they wouldn't even give her the time of day. And then she went back and she looked through all the religious reasons that girls should be going to school. And she came back with just lists. Here's why. Here's what the Quran says. Da, da, da. And they're like, yep, okay, you're right. And they started sending their girls to schools. And I mean, just a dynamo. And that, to me, that's the future of Afghanistan. That's what Afghanistan needs. And it's not the Taliban's version of things, because it will only hurt the country. It hurts the economy. It just hurts. I wanted to know, this is my last question for you, and then I'll let you close with anything you want. When I was looking through your pictures, there's this ancient Afghan Queen Gaharshad. And I don't think any of the mosques that she built are around anymore. I'm pretty sure they've all been destroyed. Most of them were in Herat, I believe. But she directed the construction of these gorgeous mosques and learning centers back in the day. And it just shows you the power that Afghan women used to be able to wield, right? That they can't wield anymore. Did you see anything from like the Gaharshad era when you were there that you know of?
No, not that I can remember. No, and we went through a lot of provinces and a lot of different areas. And one thing I'll mention, and this is sort of where sometimes things can be a little skew. If there is a travel agency in Herat, which is actually run by, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's actually run by a lady. And she's got a travel company there, and so she does travel tours of Afghanistan. And when we were actually over there, when we were in Kabul, their bus pulled up because I was staying at the same guest house, and I think she had about 6 or 7 international ladies with her. So she actually runs a business in Afghanistan as a lady, as a tourist person. So I don't know. I was thinking about it the other day. One, how did she get that set up, and two, what happens when she gets to a checkpoint? You know, she must have some good documents there to say that she can do what she can do. So it's quite opposite. Everything else I've seen was this one travel agency, and it was run by a girl, and she'd be probably an interesting person to have a chat to.
Sure. Is she Afghan or Western?
She is Afghan. Yeah, it's born and bred in Iraq.
And no mahram, no male guardian who goes with her to these things?
There was a male bus driver. There was a male bus driver, but it was definitely no. Well, I don't believe so, but because I was going to try and get her to do a tour around Herat when I was there, but she had this group of women travelling around, and I just thought it's totally different to everything else you see, but that was just one thing that stood out that was a little bit different. And I didn't get the chance to have a chat to her at their guest house to, obviously she's there with her people, but to get down to the nitty-gritty, how can you do this? How do you get by, and do you get hassled? How did you start and learn all the ins and outs? It would have been amazing.
Sure. Does she only, because you did mention, I think in the beginning, that Herat was the place with the least Taliban presence. Does her tour company only go through Herat, or the whole?
No. It travels all around.
Wow.
Like I said, I know she was based in Iraq, and it was come up through a YouTube travel, one of the vloggers, and he was going through Herat, and she did the tour there, and that's when I sort of looked up and thought, yeah, she'd be right. Then I found out, no, she was in Kabul as well, so I assume they would have flew to Kabul and had a bus there and got on a bus. So I'll give you her information off screen.
Sure. And I'm not going to be promoting. I'm serious. I will never promote travel but I think it's important to know the reality. How. Yes. Yeah. All I want to know is how, so. Yeah. Because I'll never be able to set foot. No. I know you're not. In fact, it's interesting. So it's been a really hard couple months with all these developments, and I think that the hardest thing for me was to see this woman. It's actually oh my God, Zalmay Khalilzad's wife, Cheryl Bernard, I think is her name, and she had written a piece in Foreign Policy about how it's great for women in Afghanistan. It's really not bad at all. And then she urged one of the leaders to go to this women-run restaurant in Kabul, but she didn't name it. And I mean, for that was hard. That was when my eye twitch started, was when I read that article. And it hasn't gone away since. And
no, we went to a lot of eatery places in Kabul, and Kabul's very, I'll call it metro.
Right.
No, they were all still very all male waitresses or hospitality people. A lot of those places, you still had your areas where the women had to go out the back and eat. We were probably lucky in some places. Some places we were able to eat at the front, even though I had two females with me, but I think it's purely because they were foreigners. But then there was some places where as soon as we walked in, the men would look and we were directed out the back, so we'd have to go out the back. But no, I would find it very hard to believe if there was a restaurant in Kabul with female waitresses. I doubt it very much.
I think she said it was run by women, but I mean, still, it's like I've not heard about that. And even if it was, why didn't you name it? Because you can't. And that's the important thing. It's just like you said, you're not going to name this woman. This isn't, promotion of whatever. And then you also have to wonder, I still am at the point I can't name the people that I write about when they're telling me their stories and they're in U.S. processing for things, because they might get sent back and I don't want to be the one who outs them to the Taliban. And it's that level of not being able to say things that shows you what you're dealing with. I've got so many images and videos in my inboxes of dead Afghans from following the fall. And it's heartbreaking. And so for me, like I said, I did a lot of soul searching about how do we talk about this and how, what does it mean? And I'm glad that I got to ask you those questions and learn those things without having to go. I wouldn't be allowed. They would take one look at my phone and I would be fucking ousted.
Oh, look, if I was
oh
going
my God.
back now, I think I'd have to delete WhatsApp because, I'd have no hope. Because that was one of the first questions was the phone and who I talked to and straight to WhatsApp. And so now I'd be deleted well off.
And you wouldn't want to put those people at risk that you've been helping, but that's something else. So for anybody who's still listening and still thinking, no, this is terrible, remember too, David, you were able to help people and you've been able to do things for people who couldn't have done them, that were really suffering. And I think that's really important. There are...
absolutely.
But it's just, I just can't stand it when people are like, no, the Taliban are great. And it's like, no, they're not. They're really, really, they're a terrifying group of people.
And that's where it's hard because I didn't see that, but I know there's a dark side to it all as well. You'd have to be stupid not to walk in there and go, oh, they're all good. No, they're not all tarred with the same brush.
Yeah. Well, what do you have any closing words about your travels or anything? The floor is yours, David.
Look, we've had a pretty good discussion. It's gone for just over an hour, and like I said, I'm not a supporter of the Taliban. I went for some different reasons. One, because a lot of people would ask me why did I want to go to Afghanistan, or they'd say, where are you going? Afghanistan? Why? I went for one was a bit of a personal challenge for myself. It was just I thought my life was a bit monotone. I didn't want to go to a beach and sit on a beach because I think it'd be boring. So I did look at Afghanistan and I did my research. I looked at vlogs. I looked at WhatsApp groups. I read. I asked questions. And if I probably knew some stuff that I knew now that back then I probably wouldn't have went. But I decided to go anyway as a bit of a challenge to myself, step outside my comfort zone, and more so, I met with the local community ethnic council here in Shepparton and spoke to an Afghani who came out here in 2015. He was worried for me. And he told me, ask him to contact him every couple of days just to let him know that I'm all right. But look, I'm glad I went, and I wouldn't change it any other way. I know when I got on that plane in Kabul, when I got through and on that plane to head to Dubai, there was a big sense of, I can relax now. No one's looking over my shoulder. So, but I wouldn't change it for anything else in the world. The fact that I've helped a family and someone else, and there's millions and millions of more people who need help, and I don't know how, and I don't know if it'll ever happen, but hopefully one day it will change. And the women's rights is probably the thing that really just I think about a fair bit. And if that was to change, the country would nearly change, because people would start to recognise the country more, that the women have got their rights back. And it doesn't matter what country it is, you need men and women. Women think differently to men, so you need them in business, you need them in government. So if that could ever change, maybe the country could change, but that I don't know.
Yeah, you need them to help bring other children into the world, because only women are allowed to do that there, and they now stop them from going to midwife or nursing training. So it's like, do you want your country to grow, guys? Because God, there was one Talib right at the beginning who tried to tell some midwives that, like, no, it's God who decides whether your baby's going to be born safely or not. And I can tell you, as someone who has had 2 babies, God did not make sure that I was okay. It was all the coterie of nurses and midwives and freaking doctors who made sure that my children came into the world alive and that I stayed alive. It was not God. He might have worked through them, but he had to work through them. It wasn't just like some woo-woo fairy dust. No. Anyway, I just took that from being a very heartfelt thing to let me just go after these fools. But David, I really appreciate you reaching out, and for, like I said, I was not gonna just not ask the hard questions, and I appreciate you letting me ask you the hard questions on behalf of all the people that I carry with me that I love deeply, who are seeing different aspects of this that the Taliban don't want us to see. So thank you for that. It's been a special hour, and I've really enjoyed it.
Look, thank you very much. It was it's good to talk about it, and I know your podcast is a big podcast, so hopefully people will take time to have a listen, and yes, let's just see what happens in the future.
Yeah, I want this to raise discussion. I think it's a really important thing right now, and I know there will be some really heated reactions probably on all sides to this, so I welcome that. This is a place to have constructive talk, right? It was very much enjoyable, and to everyone for who's been here watching, listening, thanks so much, Tasha Kaur, and hope to see you all again soon.